You're listening to The Pipeline, the Western Standards National Affairs program, recording this Tuesday, January 21st, 2020. Each week, we break down the issues, discuss them in depth, and examine some of the broader implications for Western Canada and beyond. Featuring from Calgary, the Western Standards publisher, Derek Fildebrandt. Welcome, Derek.
Hello.
And from Strathmore, Deirdre Mitchell-MacLean, our senior reporter.
Hello.
And myself, Paul Holmes, digital editor from the quaint island destination, Victorian, British Columbia. This week, we're going to be talking about the Regina Refinery strike. Big news there. Also, the BC Ferries blockade. Not as big a news, but news nonetheless. We're also going to be talking a little bit, a little update to the Harry and Meghan situation. And finally, some updates with the Tory leadership race that we've learned just this week. So why don't we start, first of all, with the Regina Refinery strike. Some escalation there. Derek, why don't you fill in the details?
Well, actually, why don't we go to Deirdre?
Start with Deirdre. All right. Deirdre, why don't you fill us in on the
I don't have information. I have opinions.
All right.
So, Regina Refinery strike, little bit of escalation yesterday as the Unifor National and members from Unifor, from many different locals, showed up to take the place of Local 594 at the Regina Refinery. And the reason that they did that is because back in December, the courts in Saskatchewan actually issued an order restricting Local 594 from restricting access to and from the refinery. And they restricted that to a maximum of 10 minutes, or if people decided they didn't want information, then they would have to let them go, whichever came first. Right. So that court order came out in December, and it was very specifically to the members of Local 594. So yesterday, when the the national president, that's Jerry Diaz, and others were actually stopping traffic from going in and out of the refinery, it technically wasn't members from Local 594. And yeah, so a little bit of legal loopholes there, but the Regina Police were on hand and they did make arrests. There were 14 people arrested, including the national president, Jerry Diaz, and he had a media availability this morning that discussed, he spent 7 hours in the cell. He has been charged with mischief, and I mean, they're still out there. They're back again this morning. They are calling for a boycott of refinery products at gas stations and retail stores in Saskatchewan and basically everywhere in support of their picket line at the moment.
So with the narrowness of the original court order, were the Regina Police out of order in making those arrests and interfering in the way that they did? Or?
No, a spokesperson for the Regina Police did say that even though Unifor has the right to protest and they have the right to picket, they do not have the right to restrict business. Okay. So in the way that they were doing. And so according to the Regina Police, they, there's two sets of rights, right? The business has the right to continue, and the union has a right to strike or picket, but they don't, they can't really go head to head. So it doesn't seem like, but Unifor is definitely saying that they want some de-escalation from the police, who I'm sure would like to see a de-escalation from the union, and it goes back and forth.
Well, and Unifor is based out of Toronto. I assume that the national president is probably also from Toronto. Yeah. And so this is a very significant escalation for what is a national union with locals all across Canada, right?
You will never find a greater gathering of scum and villainy than the Unifor headquarters in Toronto.
Don't hold back, Derek. Tell us how you feel.
Look, these guys are scum. So the local, so Unifor here has been doxing people. They've been putting out the pictures with names of what they call scabs, the replacement workers. And this isn't just to shame them. We know that unions do this with the hope of trying to intimidate people, make them feel physically unsafe in doing what they're doing. I mean, it is a moral decision if you want to cross the picket line. But at the same time, these guys are saying to boycott the petroleum products. So are they really calling for people to not heat their homes when we've been in -40 and -50 for a week? I mean, these people must be living in Toronto to think that this is a reasonable thing to do. If the reasons for their strike are legitimate or not, I don't know. It's a local thing in Regina, and that's between two parties. But their actions, doxing people, and then they doxed this gentleman. I know Deirdre did a story on it. They doxed this gentleman who was the owner of a liquor store in Regina, who happens to have the same name as one of the replacement workers. And so all of a sudden, he's now being harassed and publicly targeted by these people. And Unifor has refused to apologize repeatedly when asked, would you apologize to this man? Absolutely not. They can do no wrong. And now they show up and, they've got every right to protest. They've got every right to picket and to strike. But they seem to think they have the right to block entrance to private property that they do not own. And that's just outright thuggery. So
yeah, it's.
I really think the Regina Police made the right call on this one.
It's interesting. I saw the original video when they were showing faces and names of all of the replacement workers in a video. They called it, the scab expose or something. And I was shocked by that, because to me that's, they're not directly calling for violence or anything like that, but
that would be illegal.
Super heated situation, and can't be hard to find where these people live and all that sort of thing beyond that. I was surprised. I was really surprised.
When I lived in BC, I was forced to be a part of a union for a year, and I would get mail from the union advising me to vote for the Marxist-Leninist candidates for city council. I responded by putting up right to work posters in my office. But they had my address, and it made me feel not particularly safe knowing that people urging me to vote for the Marxist-Leninist Party had my home address. And so these guys are doxing people, and it's quite intentionally not safe and meant to intimidate.
The Marxists run Victoria now anyways.
People not to cross the picket line. They have every right to do that. I mean, that's their thing. But I think it's just wrong, I think, to try and intimidate people into not into complying with what they want.
Well, and I didn't respond on Twitter, and frankly, part of the reason I didn't respond on Twitter is because just whoever was managing the account was being very aggressive. If you looked at the tweets that followed, you saw that they were very aggressively blocking anybody who had a negative opinion on the video, and who knows what sort of list you got added to at that point as well. So, but I did ask my followers on my personal Facebook, and some of the people that I'm friends with that are union organizers responded saying that this is a perfectly acceptable tactic because everything else has failed, and we have the moral authority to proceed in this way. Nobody else does, but we do because we're in the moral right, and everybody else is in the moral wrong here. So. Hard to.
I would just like to add, actually, that a 2013 Supreme Court decision is what has upheld the right of the unions to dox replacement workers.
Okay.
Well, there's a difference between a constitutional right to do something and something being moral or ethical, and they often shouldn't be the same thing. I actually think from a legal perspective, the court might be correct because it's a matter of freedom of expression. And I don't particularly like the government policing what can be put out on videos and what cannot be. It should always lean towards no restriction rather than more restriction. But I think there is a very ethical problem with what they're doing here. It's very intentionally trying to intimidate people.
Well,
Of course, they're not allowed to say on the video, go find these people and cut their tires or beat them up. That would be illegal. That's advocating harm. But these guys know what they're doing, and they're thugs.
I'm a little surprised.
Perhaps it's a good time to segue into other people who believe they have a God-given moral right to block things.
Well, that's an interesting segue, Derek, because in fact, the BC Ferries this week were blocked by a group of protesters that were in support of the Wet'suwet'en First Nation, which is a First Nation way up north that is currently battling LNG. I believe that the hereditary chief there is opposed, and so they actually ended up canceling ferries on Monday morning as a result, and lots of people were inconvenienced, and just kind of brought up the whole topic around tactics. A lot of people were just very unimpressed. You know, there's a lot of people that take the first ferry on Monday morning to take their children with cancer to the BC Children's Hospital. But you know, that's the ferry that they typically take for the week so that they can get in there for their appointments. You know, and it's hard. You know, the protesters have a valid opinion. Of course they do. But you know, the families, of course, that are affected, and of course the other people who are inconvenienced in other ways. You know, this is not super appreciated, and I think probably I would say also really ineffective. You know, I think most people will see this kind of protest and they'll just say, well, who are these people? And you know, I'm certainly not going to take their side if this is the sort of tactics that they employ. So there is definitely a question around tactics, and we see this around the world with Extinction Rebellion and the like.
Well, you said they were in support of the Wet'suwet'en who opposed the Trans Mountain Pipeline. So this was not the Wet'suwet'en themselves. These were these just spoiled college kids looking for a crusader? Who were these guys?
It's hard to say. You know, I saw some photos, and I didn't recognize certainly. Obviously, I don't know anybody from the Wet'suwet'en Nation, but not a lot of the people looked like they were First Nations. It looked like a lot of people who were, you know, just, you know.
There's nothing better than rich, spoiled white liberals being outraged on someone else's behalf. These are my favorite people.
Potentially, that was the case, and it's you know. Again, do they have an opinion that's valid? Sure. And, you know, that we should be debating these opinions, but, you know, blocking ferries just struck me as kind of
well, there's a difference between protesting
tactic
and saying whatever you're saying, smartly or not,
yeah.
And then blocking property and people's right to go about their business. That's quite different. So
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, interesting side news. We'll see what happens there, but it certainly ties in with the general opposition, let's say, of the left to energy development, and definitely a little closer to British Columbia. Speaking of British Columbia, the backwater of Vancouver Island was featured on the Daily Beast this week. Actually, today they sent out a tweet talking all about the how horribly backwards Vancouver Island was, and why on earth would Harry and Meghan want to move there, which of course naturally offended yours truly, who took to Twitter to respond. One of the points that they like to make, well, because the person who'd written the article had visited Vancouver Island, so they knew what they were talking about, and you know, forgot that Victoria had the capital city of British Columbia. And I think probably the funniest thing that they wrote was that only recently was the highway expanded to the north of the island, the city at the north being Port Hardy, British Columbia. That only recently was actually in 1976. So this particular writer might not have been aware of it. They also referred to the one major thoroughfare called the Island Highway that cuts a curvy swath along the island's east coast. But that was actually supplemented by the Inland Highway 19 years ago. So for those of you who are, especially if Harry and Meghan are listening, Vancouver Island is not the backwater. It's a beautiful place. Come visit. We have highways, we have infrastructure, we have a booming tech sector, and I personally will welcome with open arms our new king and queen, Harry and Meghan. So
God save the Queen.
You want to see our beautiful Twitter discussion on that, you can follow me on Twitter at TP Holmes, and you can also troll me there. I would
just like to say that I will now be referring to my birth year as recent, which is awesome.
That's good, yeah.
Yes. The next time someone asks me my age, I would say, well, I was recently born.
Recently born, yeah. Yeah, I was born in the 70s as well, so it's fairly recent.
Yeah.
Before the highway, however, but we're not going to talk about that. What we are going to talk about, however, is the Tory leadership race. And the very, very latest, our very favorite candidate, Jean Charest, Derek, sadly has given a pass.
Oh, I don't know. Deirdre, you want to set it up and then I'll complain?
Oh, I would love to, Derek, because Jean Charest was actually, to me, a good choice. Now, hold on. The reason that I liked Jean Charest is, number one, because he's a former premier of Quebec. That gives him a little bit of an in. Now, the other thing is, for the last, I don't know how many years, he's been a resident here in Calgary. So he's got this little bit of the west-east thing going on. He has name recognition. He has some solid values that I can really get behind. So I'm a swing voter. I'm not really stuck on a particular party. So for me, I thought that he was a fantastic potential leadership candidate.
And, back in the good old days, he was the political leader in Canada that had the great hair, which, of course, the mantle has been passed along to our current Prime Minister. Derek, do you have any thoughts about Jean Charest?
I might have a few. For every reason Deirdre says that she finds him appealing, I find him revolting as a conservative leader. Just absolutely the most terrible ever. Okay, let's start. First off, he's a liberal, so he was a progressive conservative, first under Brian Mulroney, and as a progressive conservative, he was a part of a government that had the F-18 maintenance fiasco directly designed to screw the West just to help a Quebec company. You had Meech Lake, you had Charlottetown designed there to forever protect and enshrine Quebec's special status in the Constitution, the direct expense of the West, and lock the West Place into Confederation down even further than it is. He supported the long gun registry. He supported the Kyoto Accord. He supported the carbon tax. A long list of things, each one of which disqualifies someone from ever receiving my vote. Not to mention he's under very serious criminal investigation for massive corruption charges, which is, to be fair, just kind of par for the course for Quebec politicians for the most part. That doesn't make him special, just makes him par for the course. I can tell you, Western soft.
That's it.
That's the short list.
Okay.
But here's why I kind of wanted him to win. Because he's so terrible. There is a strange logic that if you are just done with trying to work within the current federal party system and you want to really shake it up either through full independence or seeking a Western kind of bloc party to represent the West, because you don't think it's very effective within the Conservative Party, this would be the guy to do it. This would be the guy to probably break the West away. So the West will probably come down to, he'll get one vote in the West, and it'll be Deirdre. And the Conservatives would be just utterly decimated in the West, as they were in 1993, when he was one of only two progressive Conservatives elected in the entire country.
Who retained their seats.
Technically, he was the only one to retain his seat, because the other one was a new MP. So technically, he was the only MP to retain his seat. out of 150 odd MPs the PCs had that year in a majority government. So they went from
That was a different time, though, and I don't think you can blame Jean Charest for that. In fact, if anything, he rose above what was going on and retained his seat, right?
Oh, yeah, certainly. But he was a part of the whole crew, and Meech Lake and Charlottetown were probably the big things that led to the total collapse of the PCs, both to the Bloc Québécois and to the Reform Party. And he was fully supportive of Meech Lake and Charlottetown and everything that went on. It's kind of ancient history. These are battle scars from before my time, although I suppose it is recent. But he is the worst possible guy they could have had. It is notable that all of the, what it looks like will be the candidates for the Conservative leadership are from the East. Not a single Western candidate, even a token Western candidate, will be on the ballot.
Charest would have been.
Pardon?
Charest at least would have been a token Western candidate.
Oh. Quebec Liberal Premier cannot be a token Westerner. I'm sorry. The only token Westerner I will accept from Quebec is Maxime Bernier.
Well, I, for one, am happy that he's out of the race because now you two can be friends again. So.
Oh, no, we would have potentially voted for him just for radically different reasons.
Yes, very radically different reasons.
I would have voted for him to blow the whole thing up. But,
so it does leave Peter MacKay and Pierre Poilievre, who seem to be the front runners. Are we going to see any other serious candidates, or is this what it's going to come down to?
Erin O'Toole will be pretty serious. There's another lady, she's in the story. I can't recall her name, but...
Marilyn Gladue.
Sure. Oh, I thought you were saying glad you mentioned it. I thought that's what you're saying. They set the bar bizarrely high to get in. I mean, there were too many candidates last time, but they didn't. There's ways to solve that. You can do like they do in the United States and have early voting, staged voting in different.
Our idea. That was our idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So, make Prince Edward Island like the Iowa votes early. It doesn't really matter because it's not many votes, but it kind of cuts the field down a bit. They didn't do that. Instead, they just made sure you had to pay some obscene amount of money to get in and meet these bars. And it's designed to be a very exclusive club. Having just a few candidates is fine, but you want to have a few candidates by the end. At the beginning, it doesn't matter if you have a dozen or more. But they made it an exclusive club. And I guess even though the powerhouses of the party are in the West, I'm guessing they surveyed the landscape, and they said, as we've discussed before, Westerner is probably not allowed to be the leader this time because it's been Western leaders before, and the East wants in now.
Final thoughts, Deirdre. And Deirdre, your final thoughts on the Conservative leadership race.
So my final thoughts would be that I'm hoping for a leader that can unify East and West. I am hoping for a leader who is going to try and bring the CPC into the modern world. I'm hoping that we will get someone that swing voters like myself can get behind, because I think that having a strong opposition and a potential winner for the next election gives us both better government this time and next time. So I want someone very strong, and I'm not sure we have that just yet.
Well, if Deirdre gets her wish, the Tories can count on not having my vote. But I'm a particularly strange voter to please in any case.
Well, and it does raise a very interesting divide, right? There is definitely two competing factions on the Conservative. Well, there's a few, I suppose, competing factions in the Conservative camp, and I don't see a unifier that's going to bring all of those people together. Certainly emerging on the scene just yet, and maybe that person will, but I'm not sure.
Still have until February 27th.
Well, and they have to wrestle together. Was it $600,000 or?
It's $200,000 for their entry fee, $100,000 for the compliance fee, which is probably not as much of an issue. I mean, it is an issue for normal people, but it's probably not as much of an issue as the 3,000 signatures that they need from people who have been members for at least 21 days.
Okay.
That could be the real sticking point.
And do they have to have a
very small window they had, though, from the time they released the forms and these things? They made it a very small window, so it can only be someone who's already got a significant organizational capacity right now. There's no room for kind of a real...
You mean at Tory's?
No, yeah, but there's also no room for kind of a dark horse anti-establishment candidate unless they've already got significant organization in place.
Well, and I would add to that a little bit that we look at Bernier last time coming so close to winning with what did he have, one MP endorse him, or was it?
Oh yeah, he had roughly a half dozen. He actually had more MLAs in Alberta endorse him than federal MPs. Yeah,
and so you look at it. I assumed that the signature thing, with the dates and stuff, had more to do with making sure you have somebody that's friendlier to the establishment in Ottawa, basically.
I believe that is what this is.
It's certainly not a membership drive.
Having the signature requirements, having some signature requirements is not unusual, but these high ones and in such a short period of time and the high entry fee, I think there's a very explicitly designed to have this be both a smaller number of candidates compared to last time, but also try to keep the field to more establishment-approved candidates.
Well, and a slap to the Bernier supporters as well, right? Because many of them, of course, packed up and left, canceled their memberships. They certainly could have rejoined the party if they to vote, but obviously can't in this situation.
That's not correct. They if they so decided, I'm not sure how many will, but if they decided, they could still sign up to vote. I think what they're saying is to be able to sign the petition, get into the race, you have to be a member already. But I think if a former Bernier supporter from the last race or who's PPC now, whatever they are, they could still sign up for whenever the vote is going to be.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the signatures aren't actually due until March 25th, I believe.
Okay, so I could become a member today and still sign somebody's nomination forms.
With Jean Charest, I don't think I will.
And highly recommend it. I really want people to get involved, and it is tough because it's mostly the partisans who will get involved, who will pay attention. But as I said, I think a strong opposition gets us good government today and after the next election. So I really want to see, people should get in there.
Like if a guy like Charest was the Tory leader, he would probably not even be the leader of the opposition. Like the Tories would fall apart into a heaping pile of shit very, very quickly. It would not end well. There is absolutely no way he would ever become prime minister because the whole base of the party would walk away.
But you do realize that Maxime Bernier, who had so much support during the leadership race, absolutely tanked it during the election. Why? Because that's not what people wanted. You need to be someone who is palatable to the majority, not the minority.
Well, actually, governments almost never get a majority of voters. In our first past the post system, 38% is often enough to claim yourself have a majority mandate. Parties
but 3% is really far from that.
Yeah, but I don't think that was based on policy. I think actually most conservative voters, if we're just talking, if we did kind of the blind taste test, I think most conservative voters would actually prefer Bernie's policies. But we know that people are much more likely to vote against what they really hate and who's got the best chance of defeating who that is, in this case the Tories, against Trudeau, than for something they want. If we did kind of an ideological blind taste test, I bet actually what Bernier was running on is much more popular with most conservatives.
And I don't think
hold their nose because they want to get rid of Trudeau.
I don't think it was necessarily a good litmus test how everything went down, too. I dare say if he had become leader of the Conservative Party, he would have done better than 3%, or whatever it was in the end. Whether or not it would have been enough to win an election.
It's like, so that's your premise, Deirdre, that if Bernier had been Tory leader, they would have gotten 3%.
Oh, no. See, because as long as you have the right sign, it doesn't matter what your policies are.
And on that fantastic note, we have given the last word to Deirdre. Thank you so much for joining us this week on The Pipeline from Calgary. Again, the Western Standards publisher, Derek Fildebrandt. Thank you, Derek. And from Strathmore, Deirdre Mitchell-MacLean, our senior reporter, and myself here in the backwater of Vancouver Island in British Columbia. No snow on the ground this week.
You look like you're in a backwater with your Guantanamo Bay studio.
Coming to you live from a cave in Vancouver Island, digital editor Paul Holmes. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week, assuming that the coronavirus doesn't wipe us all out.